Hi, everybody. We are going to start here in about 1 minute, so just hold tight. Thank you. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I know some folks are still logging in, but thank you so much for joining us. My name is Lisa Bacot. I'm the Executive Director of the Florida Public Transportation Association, right there. I'm down here in Tallahassee, Florida. So thank you all for joining us. This is the third of our Transit Tuesday webinar, which is a cooperation between 10 state and regional transit associations across the nation. Hopefully on your slide, you can see we have all of these different associations that are part of our effort. We have Arizona, we have the California Association of Coordinated Transportation Systems, Colorado, Florida, Illinois, Pennsylvania, the Southwest Transit Association, which represents numerous states in the Southwest region, Tennessee, Virginia, and Washington. So we have all quickly realized in the beginning of this pandemic that we should combine our efforts. We were trying to find the best way to give information and resources out to our members, and thought that getting together a consortium of associations and having webinars every other week would provide you as our members the best and most up-to-date information. So our webinar today is called Leading a Reinvention After Disruption. So that is what we're here to talk about. Our leader is going to be Mindy Price, and she is the Chief Pace Setter for Direct Effect Solutions. And our webinar today is sponsored by Nova Bus. And we have Denton Shuey here, and then he's going to start off our webinar today and talk to you a little bit about Nova Bus and show you a really cool video that they have for us. So just a few, next slide, Jackie, and then Denton, I'll go ahead and introduce you. Just a little bit about how we're going to flow today. I wanted to just let you all know, as attendees, you are on mute. You will have an opportunity to ask questions, and we'll go through that after Mindy has given her presentation. You'll enter your questions onto the dashboard. The handout today is also already available on the dashboard under the handout tab. Also, the state associations will be recording this and putting it on our webpage along with the handouts. So if you missed any part of the presentation or know someone that wanted to attend and couldn't, you should be able to get that information from your state or regional transit association that you work with. Also wanted to note that this is not for the media and is not for duplication. Again, the state associations are the ones that are putting this on, and it will be available on our webpage. I did want to go ahead and begin, and I'll introduce Denton Shuey. Denton is from Nova Bus, and he has been the regional sales manager for the Western Territory for Nova Bus for 3 years. Prior to this position, he worked at American Seating, MCI Motor Coaches, and Cummins Engine Company. He is based in Folsom, which is right outside of Sacramento, California. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Jackie Montgomery, who's the Executive Director for CALAC. She is helping us with the presentation today and advancing the slides and doing all kinds of great stuff. So thank you, Jackie, for being our support on this today. And so now I will hand it over to Denton. Thank you, Denton.
Thank you, Lisa, very much. Appreciate the opportunity to share with you just for a few minutes before the webinar a little bit about Nova Bus. We appreciate being able to sponsor this event for you guys and look forward to seeing what the particular webinar is all about here today. For those of you who don't know who Nova Bus is, we're owned by Volvo Group. We have Volvo Group has heavy duty construction, Mack and Volvo trucks, Volvo buses, and our sister company is Prevost. I think you might know that in terms of the seated coaches and private coaches throughout the country and Canada. We manufacture for the transit group 40 and 60-foot buses, and are all built in Plattsburgh, New York, our upstate New York facility. Just so you guys know as well, we have 12 American service centers, Nova Bus and Prevost service centers scattered throughout the country from the west to the east. And we offer parts and service support, not necessarily just for Nova, but for other brands as well that you run in your transit agencies. We offer long-range battery electric, CNG, hybrid, and diesel buses. So Jackie, if you'd be so kind as to launch our corporate video, this might give you guys a better look at our brand and what we stand for. Take it away.
Every day, public transit is used by a large number of citizens around the world. To meet their needs, commuters have always looked for ways to travel more efficiently in cities and while on the road. Since the beginning, the Volvo Group has been dedicated to carrying out this fundamental ambition. I am the outcome of this mission. I was created from a sheer willingness to make a difference in the city's day-to-day. I move forward with a commitment that is always top of mind, helping people with increasing acuity get around their cities and becoming a leader in my field, a leader that each person easily trusts. My roots stem from the robust structures built in Saint-François-du-Lac. My name is synonymous with reliability. When I work, it is for the long run. From assembly plants in Saint-Eustache to Plattsburgh, I relentlessly focus on your future. Engineers work side by side with me to guarantee a highly robust and flexible technology. Together, we constantly conduct research to improve satisfaction and safety. Over the years, I have explored a world of opportunities in energy-efficient solutions with the development of the prestigious LFS range of buses. Between buildings and homes, I have ridden roads across North America with diesel, hybrid electric, articulated, natural gas, and 100% electric vehicles. Today, I am still pushing the technological envelope further by paving the way for electromobility with the LFS E+. Everywhere behind me, there is a multitude of passionate workers who are driven by a need to overcome all challenges that surround their common goals, creating efficient public transit solutions that are durable and adapted to different lifestyles. I am always attuned to change. This year, over 20 service centers will cater to meet the needs of each vehicle, each driver, and each passenger. I am the pride of thousands of workers. I am synonymous with the promise of prosperity in an economy that is geared towards the realities of tomorrow. I am by your side to support you in sustainable development. I stand the test of time. I am Nova Bus.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Jackie, for queuing that up for me. Again, everyone, thanks for listening. Feel free to reach out to myself or any of my colleagues if you have any questions about our platform. And I will be throughout the webinar and will be at the end if you have any questions for me as well as Mindy. So again, thank you very much. And I turn it back over to Lisa.
Thank you, Denton. Appreciate it. And thank you so much for Nova Bus for sponsoring today. We really, really appreciate it. All right, so we are going to get started here with Mindy Price. Mindy is, she is a consultant. She consults on process improvement, change management, and enterprise level organizational leadership. Mindy is qualified to deliver Myers-Briggs personality profiling, has the 6 Sigma Yellow Belt in diversity and inclusion, and is an expert on human behavior as it relates to organization change and process improvement. She has spoken at many national conferences and led research projects, which include in-depth case studies, and focus groups to identify needs in leadership development and enterprise level programs. She lives in Columbus, Ohio, is in spending time in her vegetable garden this summer, which I think a lot of us have probably brought on new hobbies in our life over the last few months. Mindy also delivers our Florida Transit Leadership Program and does a great job. We did have to cancel it this year due to the pandemic that we're all dealing with, but we really want to thank her for her continued support on that program. So today she is going to talk about leading a reinvention after disruption. And before we get started, since many of you are having your summer breaks disrupted, I thought I would here's where I am, the state of Florida. You can kind of think about this at your hopefully future vacation. You can come down to Florida, but I'm sorry that all of us are in this situation, but thank you for joining us today. I will tell you, when we planned this webinar, and we thought mid-July would be plenty of time and we'd mostly be through the disruption, but here we are still in it, but still Mindy's topic is something that we all need to really think about and delve into for our future. So Jackie put up on the screen here, we will again have an opportunity for questions. We can show you a little bit later on how to do that, but I would love to introduce you to Mindy Price. Mindy, take it over.
Thank you, Lisa. Is my sound good?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So another just interesting fact, I grew up not too far from Plattsburgh, New York, where those Nova buses are actually designed and created. So I am here in Columbus, Ohio today. However, I am a Central New Yorker born and raised. So that was neat to see that video. So today's talk, we're actually going to be discovering how to lead a reinvention after our disruption. And what I really want to start with defining what a reinvention really means. So it is not one big grand gesture or one great big idea. It's really the collection of a lot of small actions that will create momentum in a new direction for your organization. So we're going to spend a little bit of time breaking down what actually happened, the responses that we took, the actions that we took from an organizational perspective, our lessons learned, our successes that we had. And then we're really going to think about what are those small actions that we could be putting in place that will begin to create momentum in a new direction. So a reinvention is not something big or grand. It is a bunch of small actions that will create that momentum in the new direction. As we go through our talk today, we are going to ask you guys to participate and interact with us. So we do have a number of polls that we will be presenting to you, so be ready to be interacting along the way as well, because we want to hear from you. We want to gather some data from you as we present this information to you today. So on our first slide, you are going to see, Jackie, next slide, that let's talk about what actually happened in this disruption. So if you were to gather some of the perspectives and brainstorm the adjectives or the words that really describe what this disruption is, you will see this list, and probably you could even brainstorm more. So this pandemic caused a disruption that rippled through our economy, our workplaces, all different aspects of our lives that really created disruption from all different aspects. So we really need to capture the scope of the disruption to start with. As we experience this disruption, we also all learned a new common language. Who used to use the phrases social distancing, unprecedented, a new normal, uncertainty. We learned how to flatten the curve. We learned no contact interactions would be a thing that we would be talking about here in 2020. So these are some of the new behaviors and the new language that are really going to be incorporated into whatever this new normal is going to look like. And on our next slide, we're going to look at some of the recent trends that have actually happened as a result of this disruption. So the global response to this disruption caused these three recent trends. So we've had economic volatility. So we have concerns about the changes in the market, daily changes. Although, you know, today's market, it's actually not doing so bad after all. But we've had a lot of government bailouts that are going to affect and have affected the economic volatility. We, interestingly, in e-commerce, we had the fastest incline and the fastest decline of certain products through e-commerce that we have ever seen before in our lifetimes. So disposable gloves, bread machines, and cough medicines actually had the fastest incline in e-commerce versus luggage, briefcases, and swimwear, and unfortunately bridal wear saw the fastest declines in e-commerce than ever in the past. And those are just some trends that are happening as a result of this disruption. And also, and probably similar to what many of you have experienced, remote work increased significantly from 28% of our workforce working remotely in 2019 to 53% of our workforce actually working remote now in 2020. And I expect that that number will stay or increase as we continue to figure out our reinvention or what things we want to put in place to practice in the future. So as we think about the actions that our organizations have taken, those are going to be what our starting point is for our reinvention. Our actions that our organizations have taken, those trends in our organizations are really going to be our starting point for our reinventions. So Jackie, we're going to launch our very first poll because I'd like to capture some data from our audience now and learn what actions did your organization take in response to the pandemic. So you should see now a poll on your screen, and you may select all that apply to your organization. So select all of the options that are the actions that your agency took in response to the pandemic. And Jackie, I'll kind of let you lead us in the...
All right, we've only had 50% vote, so if we could get a few more people to vote in 5, 4, 3, 2, I'll give it a little bit longer. We're only at 60%. All right,
well,
guys.
You caught them off guard.
Yep. Okay, now I'm going to do a count again. 3, 2, 1. I am closing the poll, and I'm going to share it with everybody.
Ooh, that's awesome. All right, so on your screen, you should see the results of our poll, and look at that. 87% of you actually had staff moving to remote work. So the majority, more than the majority of you actually showed that your staff has moved to remote work. That's very interesting. And remember, we could select all that applied. So many of us may have picked more than one of these options. So this poll really represents where your organization is starting from. So as you start thinking about the reinvention actions that you will want to take, and Jackie, we can go back to, yep, awesome, the reinvention slide, perfect. So as you start thinking about the steps that you'll want to take, and you can advance to our next slide, we're going to think about the results of that poll and really capturing our actions that our organizations have taken are really representing the starting point for the reinvention that our agencies will need to start developing our plan. So as you think about developing your plan for reinvention, you will first want to debrief what are the actions taken, what are the impact of those actions, what lessons have you learned, and what successes have you had, to really start establishing what does your plan need to look like that are those small actions that you can put in place that are really reinventing your organization in the goal of becoming just more efficient and more improved, more agile, more flexible, more competent to deliver those services to all of our customers. So as we plan, we're going to actually start thinking about taking an inside to external perspective. So on our next slide, as you start really now designing what that reinvention plan is going to look like, we first start by doing a hindsight review on ourselves. So the first step in the reinvention is really to start with yourself. What did you learn about yourself in the disruption? What did you learn about yourself in your responses to everything that happened? Because this disruption was a greater impact than just to our workplace. This affected us personally in our home life and our own personal economic standing, our own personal homeschooling circumstances, what our own personal attributes were. So first we have to start with ourselves, and we have to look at how did we respond in this global pandemic. Do an honest assessment. How did you learn how to spend your time? What was your response? Were you filled with fear and dread and uncertainty and anxiety about the circumstances, or did you embrace the opportunities and be agile to whatever the environment was? How well did you communicate with your team, with your staff, to provide that clear direction and understanding about what was going to happen next? How have you managed yourself, and what changes do you need to make in your own personal reinvention as you start to think about what is recovery and the new normal going to look like? So have we gotten into maybe some bad habits of this working from home and living a more flexible lifestyle? I have clients that talk about the COVID-15, so it's worse than the freshman 15. Many of us got a little bit lazy in our ability to work out and exercise, and we found ourselves eating from anxiety or just because we were bored. And we put on a few extra pounds that we need to be focused on actually getting healthy again and finding a routine or a schedule and really being thoughtful and mindful about how we are spending our time and our energy to make sure that we are taking the very best care of ourselves that we can in our self-management. So on the next slide, we're going to see some takeaways, some actions that you can perform as you are designing and drafting your plan for your reinvention. And you start with yourself. Do an honest assessment through reflection about how did you respond to the changes in our world as a result of this disruption. So how did you respond? Were you agile? Were you resistant? Were you decisive? Were you a little wishy-washy? Were you calculated in your ability to respond? If it's hard for you to perform that self-reflection, then ask a trusted advisor for feedback. So ask someone who has been able to observe what your behaviors have been or have been involved in with you that can actually give you some of that constructive feedback. Because reinvention really starts with us being the very best that we can be in order for us to lead others to be the best that they can be. So another way to really think about how well are you using your time and your energy is to track it. So if you're really not sure about how well you're doing from a time and energy management perspective, write it down, keep track. How are you spending your time? Are you really re-energizing yourself in order to take good care of yourself? So I know all the introverts in this world are kind of enjoying the isolation, where a lot of us extroverts are having a difficult time and need to find other ways to be able to recharge and re-energize ourselves. So check in on yourself first, because we have to be our best first before we can actually assist others. So it's that old saying on the airplane about put your own mask on first, and then you will be able to assist others. So after we've taken care of ourselves, now we're going to turn to really looking at the next step in our plan, and that's looking at our employee and our client engagement and relationships. So on our next slide, we're going to take a look at employee and client engagement. So we said in our poll that 87% of us have actually moved our staff, ourselves or our staff, to remote work. So as managers and supervisors and leaders in an organization, it's going to be really important that we recognize that employee engagement is going to be impacted by the stress of this disruption. Employee engagement is the single highest driver in your ability to retain your employees. And right now, it's really important that we focus on retention of our existing staff in our employees, and employee engagement is the #1 way in order to retain your employees. And a worldwide study actually found that the #1 single highest driver in employee engagement is whether or not workers feel that their managers are genuinely interested in their well-being. And now, more than ever, is the perfect time for all of us, managers, supervisors, leaders, all of us, to ensure that we are demonstrating that we care and are interested in the well-being of our staff. And it's important for us to recognize what our employee expectations may be moving into whatever the next phase is going to look like, whatever that reinvention phase is going to look like for your organization. You have to address what your employee expectations are as a result of all of the actions your organization took. So in our initial poll where we said 87% of our staff moved to remote work and 64% of us had a change in the work hours for some of our staff. So that might be we've added more work hours or we've reduced work hours for our staff. 64% changed our services. 43% had an addition or a reduction of staff. So we have changed what the expectation is, what the circumstances are for our employees. And it's going to be important as we think about the reinvention plan that we meet our employees where they are, that we understand what the assumptions are that they are making, what the expectations are that they have as a result of the actions that we have taken. So we have our next poll, which is now to capture what are some of the impacts that our agencies had. So the impact of the actions, and this too will help us understand the employee expectations. So as a result of the changes in our staff, the changes in our work hours, the budget reductions, the remote work, what are the impacts of those actions? I'd like you to go ahead and take this poll and check all that apply. And Jackie, again, I'll let you sort of lead us through our.
We're at 35%. We still need several votes to come in. So we'll give everybody like another 30 seconds. If you could quickly vote so we can keep moving on to our presentation. Okay, I'm going to give you 10 more seconds. If you haven't voted, if you could hurry and vote. Okay, I'm going to count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm going to close the poll and share it.
Awesome. Ooh-wee. So 81% had an increased use in technology or automation. That has now established a new normal for your employees and their expectations of how you will do work in the future in your organization. So as a result of the actions and the impacts that have happened, our agencies have demonstrated that we can be agile, adaptable, and flexible and make decisions quickly on behalf of the entire organization. This is a blessing and a curse because now we have established a new level of expectation and what our employees know we are capable of doing from a leadership perspective in our organization. So thank you, Jackie. That's awesome. I am not surprised to see that increased use of technology. So go ahead and forward. We're going to talk about the action steps we can take when we are re-engaging with our employees. So depending on the actions your organization will take next in bringing people back to work, because I know a lot of different agencies are looking at a hybrid model of bringing people back to work. They're looking at ways to be able to bring people back to the office while maintaining social distancing, while maintaining partitions, to be able to have people physically back to work in an organization, or a blended approach where we are physically together and some of us are still remote work. So as we're looking at what are those actions the organization is going to take to be able to bring people back, these are some of the engagement activities that you can be performing with your employees individually. So it's going to be really important that you connect with each one of your staff on an individual basis, just to understand some of the assumptions, some of the impacts to them personally, what happened in their household, because what may have happened in your household is very different than what may have happened in someone else's household as a result of this pandemic. So build an individual on-ramp for the back to work and re-assimilate the staff. So people who weren't commuting have to get used to having that commute again. People who maybe were used to sleeping in a little bit in the morning or staying up too late at night had to get used to coming back to a more regular schedule when we're looking to bring people back. Another couple of ideas for engagement is to welcome and thank people individually for their contributions during the disruption, to celebrate any milestones or events that were missed, to ask each individual what their own personal reflections were. What did they learn about themselves during this disruption? Because many of us had a lot of lessons that we learned about ourselves and our ability to manage uncertainty and anxiety. It's a great opportunity to really draft individual development plans for future training and readiness, because likely we're going to be dealing with something similar to this in the future again. And then really look at how can we bring some of the practices that were successes in how we communicated or how we advanced the use of technology or even really demonstrated a greater productivity. How do you bring some of those in to the everyday practices of each of your employees individually? So as we think about our employee engagement, it's also going to be important to really think about our client engagement as well. Because in our sphere of influence, we're not just talking about our own employees as we're looking at reinvention, but we're also really looking at our sphere of influence for our clients. And your clients might actually be other team members, peers, or other groups within your organization, or they might be vendors or suppliers that you're working with that may have had business changes or impacts within their organization. So it's going to be really important to have those one-on-one conversations with not just your employees, but also those people within your network that may have experienced changes, interruptions, impacts, or new services that they are providing, that you may have to reset your future relationship with those folks as well. So it's a great opportunity to really look at, reset, and re-engage both employees and clients in your plan for reinvention. So again, your plan for reinvention is not some great big grandiose idea, a one and done concept. It's a lot of small activities that are an opportunity to improve or assess or address what the current needs are in yourself and your relationship with others, as well as your relationship with your clients. And now let's take a look at our relationship with our teams, because your teams are now one more piece of that plan that you really need to address how the circumstances have impacted them and potentially changed the way that team is operating. So from our impacts poll, we said that we may have had an increase or a reduction in business, that we had a change in the quality or quantity of our communications, that we had changes in productivity, staggered or flexible schedules in our staff, and an increased use of technology and automation. All of those impacts affected the way our team was working together. So if you think about the 4 stages of a team, forming, storming, norming, and performing, all of your teams were likely norming and performing prior to the disruption. And after the disruption, every single person's team got kicked into the forming and the storming phases all over again. So in your plan for reinvention, it's a great time to really look at what did you learn from whatever the circumstances were, the impacts, the actions that your organization took, and how does it relate to a new normal that you can put in place as the best practices for your teams. So some of the changes in communication, it may mean that not everybody on your team knows everything about what happened throughout the organization or even in the productivity of all of your team members. And as a result, some of that may create a disconnect or a misunderstanding between some of your team members. The flexibility and the staggered schedules of our staff that we had to deploy may actually have created a disconnect or a misunderstanding between team members about what was everybody's contribution, how did people actually contribute to the overall productivity. So if there was not transparency throughout the entire team, the responsibilities, the changes, and the expectations, it is likely that there are assumptions and maybe disconnects between team members. So it's a good time to really look at what are some of the things that your team put in place, how well were they communicated, and reset a new normal and a new code of conduct using some of the technology and the automation and the communications that are successful that we have put in place. It's a great opportunity to look at what are some of the lessons learned that we had through the disruption, that we could identify any dysfunction or any storming that is happening with our teams that we may need to reset as we normalize those relationships and clarify the expectations and the contributions, especially if we are going to maintain that blend of remote and on-site workers in what looks like the foreseeable future. So on that note, we're going to take a look at what were some of the lessons learned that you all had as you were managing through the disruption in this pandemic. So again, we're going to select all that apply. What could you have done better as you are doing a hindsight review and thinking about what could you have done better? Select all that apply in our next poll. Jackie, I'll let you count us down.
Okay.
It's
We
this
still have only had,
all of our people are still online, right?
yep. We still have only had like 45% vote. So let's give it another 30 seconds.
Okay.
Everyone could vote quickly. We appreciate your input. Okay, we just need a few more people to vote, please. Okay, I'm going to count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I am closing the poll and sharing the screen.
Wow, look at these results. This is very interesting. So we are more widespread in our lessons learned. So either this means y'all were really good, lots of successes, or we all picked a lot of answers and divided our votes. So very interesting. Really, you're evenly spread in your lessons learned through all of our options here in our productivity and accountability, technology access and capabilities, clear direction and expectations, communication, clarity, interaction with colleagues. Looks like that is the one thing maybe we all did best out of our lessons learned. So thank you, Jackie. And we'll go back to talking about, so what can we do now that we know more about our lessons learned? What actions can we take as we are drafting our plan? So our next slide gives us some team engagement actions that we can think about as we are reinventing or we are re-engaging our team to move them from storming to more norming. It's a great opportunity to really look at and ask our team members, what were the lessons that we learned from this recent disruption, from this recent pandemic? So how did we do from a productivity perspective, from an accountability perspective? I know I heard from a lot of clients about, oh my gosh, my whole team went remote. How do I make sure productivity and accountability is actually happening? So what did we learn from that? How do we actually use some of those performance measures in our reinvention plan and keep what is good from those lessons learned? So bring your team from that storming to that norming. Some different actions that you could take is to just bring your team back together for a lunch or a meal. Once it's all safe and you do the social distancing and require your masks or your 6 feet distance, but bring the team together for a lunch or a meal and really talk about what was the experience like for each individual person, and let people tell their stories about what happened in their households. It builds a team unity by being able to share those stories with each other. So facilitate a normalizing session for your team. So actually talk about what could the code of conduct be as you move forward into whatever this future blended environment is going to look like. So address the different contributions, address any changes that have occurred. Figure out what did you do well, your SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Determine what is the development that your team needs. So you likely learned a lot about the different skills and abilities of all of your team members. It's a great opportunity to really determine, is there a development strategy that your whole team can go through together to really unite them around a new set of skills, especially if you had new technology or new communications or even new processes that you put in place. So I actually had an example of a client that had half of their staff was in the office and half of them were working remote. And there was a misunderstanding between the half that was actually in the office thought all of the people who were working remote were really kind of on vacation. They weren't really having to be as productive as everybody else, because it was kind of an out of sight, out of mind. Like, because they couldn't see them and they didn't show up on a day-to-day basis, the staff that was on site just assumed that the remote staff was not contributing or not producing deliverables that they were responsible for. And there were some hard feelings about, they thought the half of the staff was really getting off easy. And the half that was remote felt like they were in the dark about everything that was going on, that it was the team that was on site that really had access to information, that the team that was remote felt like they were the last to know about everything that was going on. And that leader really needed to bring that whole team together and reset the assumptions, break down some of those misunderstandings that they were having that were causing conflict and dysfunction in the team, because they knew that this blended approach was going to be something that they had to manage in the future. So that's just one example of a simple circumstance about how people make assumptions and end up with hard feelings that become dysfunctions towards the team being able to work effectively and efficiently together. That is an opportunity to reset those expectations and clarify that communication. So our last step in designing our reinvention plan is an opportunity to look at business process improvement. So as we've been building our plan, we've started with ourselves, and then we've looked at our relationship with our employees in our immediate sphere of influence, our employees and our clients, our peers or our vendors, our suppliers, to really understand perspectives and what the impacts were that have affected each one of us personally, to reset that relationship. Then we broadened out to our team and really looked at how do we move our team from storming into norming to avoid any sort of dysfunction in our team that would be a barrier to our ability to be as efficient and effective as we can. And now we take a look at, then how do we refine some of our business processes that are some of the lessons that we learned as a result of this pandemic. So again, in our poll, we learned in our lessons learned that we had 23% of you, 23% of you had lessons learned in your technology access and capability, that you had lessons learned in the clear direction and expectations, lessons learned in communication clarity and frequency. So those are opportunities for you to go back and say, how do we improve those processes based on what we have learned as a result of this disruption? So there are many ways to do business process improvement. There are many different types of business process improvement that you can do. So one of the quickest and most impactful business process improvement I recommend with any client is to do a meeting inventory to figure out what meetings are truly critical for the communication flow in an organization. And based on the most recent disruption, it should have made it very clear what kinds of communications are absolutely essential to what types of audiences throughout your organization. So it is great a time as ever to actually do a meeting inventory and then adjustments to the type, the audience, and the frequency of the meetings that are happening within your organization. You'd be surprised the time and energy that you can save and the streamlining of communication that you can share by actually reducing the number of meetings that you have. I know all of you are out there going, what? We're going to reduce meetings? I can't believe it. We'll actually improve communication if we reduce our meetings. But it's true. You can reduce the number of meetings if you get really clear about the purpose, the outcome, and then the flow of the information as a result of the meetings that you have. Another technique in process management or in business process improvement is to actually do process mapping. So now that we have implemented all of these new technologies, we may need to address some of the manual practices that were actually happening in order to reduce them or eliminate them and make sure people know that you are now implementing automation. So I have an example for a client that they actually had a physical person that had to be in the office to do all the signing of checks. And they were able to implement an electronic signature. So the finance people had been asking to be able to do electronic signature for years and gotten pushback from their IT department as well as their CEO. And then the pandemic happened and it made it a very real circumstance that they needed to implement the electronic signature, and they were able to do so. And so they actually streamlined that process of signing those checks down from, it actually used to take them over a day or longer to have all the checks signed, and now they do it in less than an hour. So that's real quantitative process improvement that was actually created based on automation due to the disruption that now you can generate and demonstrate that's a true process improvement. So another couple of techniques are critical thinking, to actually look at what are some of the things that you should be doing or what you should stop doing, what you should keep doing within your organization. And then just brainstorming with sticky notes, or by using your Zoom technology, you can actually use the whiteboard function to do more brainstorming. So let's launch our last poll that's going to capture all of the successes that we've had. And so we're going to look at what are the successes, what went well in your organizations that you can capitalize and leverage as you are doing your business process improvement. So check all that apply and let's see your successes.
Mindy, just so you know, on the last one, it was not allowing people to choose multiple choices. And I'm thinking this is the same way since it says select one of the following.
Oh.
So just as a heads up.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, guys. I thought I changed them all to multiple, so I apologize for
That
that.
a little tricky. It's just, well, we'll pick which one. So
everyone has to prioritize. Yep.
So Lisa, thank you for saying that, because it actually explains the change in percentage on that last poll. So yes.
Sorry, guys.
Well, you're going to pick the most important one. The best success. We'll just rephrase it. What was your best success?
Okay, let's give it 10 more seconds. We could get everyone to vote. Okay, I'm going to do a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll now, share the results.
Ooh, look at that. Staff utilization and streamlining business processes. That's fantastic, you guys. So staff utilization is a critical aspect in being able to be efficient and effective in your automation or in your organization. So interestingly, staff utilization was a major success, and then increased productivity only got a sad little 10%. So that would be interesting to dig into just a little bit to understand that better. But I know that y'all just needed to pick one. So we're going to go with you picked your best option. So let's talk about your action steps and ways to improve business processes so that you have your takeaways on our next slide. Gives you some action steps to be able to actually do some process improvement, although that seems to be the highest success that all of you had, which is fantastic, because there is that old saying, never waste a crisis, right? So we never want to waste a crisis. And this is a great time to get smart about doing things better in your organization. So just some action steps. Use your successes and your lessons learned for direction, for leverage, for validation of what your reinvention plan should look like. Doing an inventory and adjust the meetings, because that allows people to use their time wisely to the highest best use for their contributions. Leverage these new technologies and automation capabilities for your communications, and then use your process mapping to really qualify and quantify how fast you can actually use your technology and your automation to do things more accurate as well as quicker throughout your organization. So we'll wrap it up with your complete action plan. So on our final slide here, you're going to see your takeaway from today's how to lead your reinvention after a disruption. And again, it isn't one big thing. It's a lot of little things that you can actually put in place that will have a big impact to your organization. So start with an after action review. Look at what were the actions, the impacts, the lessons learned, and the successes that your organization had. That determines your starting point for what your reinvention plan is going to look like. And then assess yourself. So take a look at yourself. How did you respond? Adjust your habits if you need to. Next, have candid conversations with your staff so that you can understand their assumptions, their expectations, and reset any of that relationship. Design or draft a development plan for your individual staff members to make sure you have reset them and re-onboarded them to be successful in whatever the new environment is going to look like. Have a team meeting. So re-normalize your team, reset the code of conduct based on the communications that you need and based on the scheduling and the approach to work, what it's going to look like in the future, and then assess your business processes and apply any process improvements that allow you to take advantage of this disruption in order to reinvent your agency or your organization for success. That wraps me up, Jackie. So I'm going to turn it back over, I think, to Lisa.
That's me. Thank you so much, Mindy. That was great and gave us really a lot of good things to think about as we move through this, this situation that we're all dealing with. There were a few questions that were put into our question panel here. So someone did just want to point out that we all need to be mindful of staff that may have experienced a loss of friend or family member, a close individual, certainly. We all agree with that. And another individual asked what SWOT stood for, SWOT. I quickly just answered that it was strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, but did you want to talk a little bit more about that process?
Sure. So a SWOT analysis is a simple approach to actually allow your team to talk about what are the current circumstances, what are the strengths of the current circumstances, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. So you can just create a 4-quadrant matrix. I actually have a tool. I can throw it out there. If you wanted to share it with your audience, I'd be happy to provide that to you, Lisa. But it's really just a brainstorming technique for everybody to talk about their perspective of what went well, what didn't go so well, what opportunities are there, and what are the risks that still exist within this environment as you look to be able to create your plan for the future. And typically, you focus on the strengths and the opportunities as an outcome of that discussion that really help inform what your plan is for next. And then you mitigate the weaknesses or the risks and the threats with alternative actions as you are looking forward to your planning.
Great, thank you. If you do want to submit questions, you can go to your GoToWebinar control panel, click on the question tab, and you can type in your question there and just hit send, and we will get a copy of the question. So a few folks are telling us there's no audio or sound, but I can hear Mindy, and I believe she can hear me. So I think it could be just a connection issue, so I apologize. And I'm being told other people can hear us, so thank you, Catherine. Does anyone have any other questions that you'd like to put into the message box? I did get a question about the handouts. They are already available in your GoToWebinar control panel. If you click on the handout tab, you can download that PDF. And then also as a reminder, each state transit association will be placing this onto their webpage, and you can download it from that. And also the whole webinar will also be on there as well. Again, if you want to refer back to it, or if anyone else wanted to listen to it. I'm not seeing any other questions here. Give you all a couple.
This is Jackie. I'm going to ask a question. So, did you all? I know you talked about it a little bit, but maybe some tools for measuring productivity of staff working at home.
Yeah, that is a great question. It has been asked frequently, and it is a common question. So it really depends. And here's the typical consultant answer. It depends on the circumstances, but it does depend on the type of work that your team does in order to determine that productivity and accountability. So there are different metrics that you can use depending on the type of work that your staff does. But the quickest and probably easiest answer is don't just track time. Don't just track, when does the person log in and when do they log out, because it doesn't mean they've been productive. So use deliverable-based tracking in specific durations of time. So if you have work that someone is supposed to produce, there is a deliverable that they should be presenting to you. That is the greatest way to track productivity is, are they getting the deliverable done in the duration of time that they were allowed to be able to do it? So I do find a lot of managers just want to see, what time did you get in? What time did you log out? Are you there in the list? But that doesn't necessarily equate to productivity. It also doesn't equate to the engagement with other team members. So the first best way is deliverable and duration. And then it's a matter of accessibility. Are they responding to questions or needs from other team members in a timely fashion? So those are ways to really be able to see, are your people engaged in doing what they're supposed to be doing? Jackie, does that answer your question?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Good question. Someone else, let's see here. Okay. Okay, there was a question that said, or a statement, I find it very intrusive to ask staff to attend lunch due to COVID-19. precautionary measures, what other means of togetherness are available?
So can I ask a clarifying, is everyone remote in that circumstance?
Let's see if he will answer that question.
Well, I'm going to assume everybody's remote because they don't want to do the face-to-face.
Let's see here. Hold on one second. Trevor, he hasn't. Trevor, if you wanted to clarify, it might not be. I mean, obviously, transit is an essential service, and a lot of us are
Okay.
going into office or going into work. So it could be either way, I suppose.
Okay. So
I'd have
the
to
question again was in replace of a lunch? Was that it?
Mhm.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
What are other things they can do to be together without having a lunch together?
Okay. So some of the other options for bringing your team together are really to use some of these remote tools. So everyone just dials in and then you see each other on the screen, but you don't make it work related. So you make it something more social. So maybe prior to, you ask everyone to go out and take a picture of the garden that they're growing, or what their backyard looks like, or where their retreat space is in their house, or something that they would share socially that is more personal for people to be able to socialize and engage around, that is more of that informal, that helps with the team building and breaks down some of the barriers about we don't know where anybody is and what they're doing, and it's hard to maintain that connection. So there are a bunch of team building, icebreaker things that you can do from a water cooler perspective. Another idea, and I don't know if this is possible with budgets, but another idea that a client used was they sent all of their team members a gift card for Grubhub or Uber Eats or whatever the local delivery place is. And they had food delivered to each employee wherever they were. And then they all had lunch together, but they were remote, and it was on the company. So I do know a lot of agencies are doing happy hours together. I don't know if that's something, I am not suggesting that y'all should, although it is getting that time on the East Coast. So we could be raising a glass out here, but that's another social, but you just do it remote by having everybody available and on camera, but give them a reason or a purpose to engage. So either give them a homework assignment ahead of time that they're sharing a picture or they're sharing a event, or each person is even making their favorite recipe, and then they have to share what the result is of whatever they've cooked. But you just make it more social. I hope that answers the question.
It does, and someone did clarify it was a remote work situation,
Okay.
so I think that's some good suggestions. All right, next question. I see that you have a process mapping matrix on your slide. Is that something that is shareable, or can you share your resource?
Happy to. I will send it along with the SWOT. So I'm assuming you have a way to distribute to all the attendees. Okay,
Yes,
perfect.
we
Yep,
do.
I will send it. I'll actually send that handout with all the ideas for the social icebreakers for your teams too. Yeah.
Perfect.
Me too.
Okay, next question. Very good question. How do you implement a new way of doing business when in constant crisis mode?
Iteratively. So that's a tough one. Honestly, that's a tough one. So it would mean really looking at, and right now it's just so hard to predict what is going to be that common factor that we can put in place to be able to rely on. So probably the number one most important aspect of your organization right now is direct and clear communication. so that as things continue to change, you are communicating that in a swift and clear way that is consistent across your organization. Beyond that, right now, I don't know how much consistency we can actually implement in our practices other than to help people build their technology aptitude. I mean, that's not going away. So right now in our current environment, I know I have a lot of clients that are they're recognizing the technology skill disparity within their workforce. So there is no harm in really focusing on developing all of those technology skills so that there is not that disparity, because technology is not going away. It is probably going to be incorporated even more so into every aspect of the work that everybody is doing. So I would say, developing that technology aptitude for everyone, wherever you've seen that disparity, but the clear and consistent communication channel is probably the #1 most important aspect, because we are still uncertain about what things are going to look like, and things are constantly changing. So even though we thought, like Lisa said in the beginning, we thought by now we would be looking at reinvention, and even here in Ohio, we are backsliding. And it's uncertain for the future.
No comment.
If you have, okay, if anybody has additional input, please, this is not just me. I don't know anything. I don't know everything. So if other people have ideas, I hope they're throwing them out there too.
All right. Well, we have a kind of a long question, so I'm going to say it slowly, and I might have to get closer to the screen since I'm an old lady and can't see very well. All right. One output of these metrics, which will be criticality of the reported results. Said another way, in a continuous improvement framework, are there tools to decipher which metrics have greater value in the moment over others? Understand it depends, but the pandemic has magically made everything important. How does one look for opportunities for improvement with such challenging day-to-day changes? Just similar to the last question.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's what we have learned. And here's what everyone, even if it's just implied in an organization, to our employees and even our clients, is we can make decisions swiftly. We can act agile even in some of our traditional workplaces. So transit has been fairly traditional. As much as it is innovative, there are a lot of aspects of transit that are still a little bit bureaucratic and traditional in the way that we have always done things. So what we have learned is we are all capable of being decisive, of being adaptive, being agile. So perhaps instead of process improvements or mapping or ensuring some consistency in that area, we focus on the competencies that we have all displayed in our ability to make decisions swiftly, to be agile and adaptable to our circumstances, and start thinking about how do we leverage those competencies as we continue to address what the uncertainties are that are still going to come at us. So it's a great opportunity for leadership to really come together and say, oh, wow, look at that. We are agile and adaptable, and we are decisive. What was it that we did in all of those competencies that we're going to need to leverage and apply to the future as we continue to embrace change and uncertainty until we have an end, until we have a vaccine, really. Okay. Does that help? I hope.
It does help. I don't see any more questions, and that kind of leads us into our next, if anyone else wants to put a question, feel free, but our next webinar will be July 28th, and it will be marketing and messaging to our riders and to the elected officials, and getting more information out there on what we did, what we're still doing in transit, and kind of getting the word out there about it's safe to use transit. You know, you can come back to transit. So that is actually will be our next, let's see right here, Restoring Transit Rider Confidence, July 28th. Thank you, Jackie. That's going to be, I think, an important one for all of us to listen to. Then August 11th, Innovation During a Time of Crisis. Some of our transit systems out there really took this opportunity to you know, come up with something brand new. And I think that's going to be really interesting for everyone to hear about. And then also September 8th, Crisis Intervention. Okay, we're going to go on to, thank you, the next slide. I wanted to thank Mindy Price. Thank you so much, Mindy. That was really great, and it was just a lot of great information, a lot of things for us to think about as we move forward. Especially thank Nova Bus. Denton, if you're still on, thank you so much for your support. There he is. There he is. Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Denton, as well, and we really appreciate Nova Bus's support.
You're
I believe
welcome.
that's it. Jackie, is there anything else we need to do to close up, other than reminding you again to reach out to your State Transit Association? They will be putting this webinar on their webpage and the handouts, and Mindy, I'm sure, will follow up with a couple things that everyone asked for, so we'll definitely get those out there too.
Nothing on my end, just that give your associations a couple days to get them up on the websites, and just really appreciate Mindy and Nova Bus and Denton for your sponsorship and your presentation today. It was really interesting and I learned a lot. So thank you guys so much.
Definitely.
And thanks,
Excellent.
Lisa. Thanks, Lisa, for moderating and hosting this.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you again, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Do we stay on or are we going?